Hello everyone. This is John Winchell, and it's another installment of the Fireside Chat webinar. We've had four real good webinars so far. The weather's starting to get a little bit good finally in Western New York here. So one of the topics that I've always liked to talk about and have been very interested in for years is how we can help our producers in the best way that we can, in the most economical way we can. And as nutritionists, we look at a lot of different things that we can do on the farm from the nutrition side. But when you look at cow comfort, that is one of the biggest issues that we always face on the farm. So this week, I'm very proud to have Dr. Jeffrey Bewley from Kentucky. He is a good friend of mine, has been with Alltech for, I think, about 3 years now. He's known all over the place and has talked in a lot of different conferences and is very well respected in the industry. So I'm going to turn this over to Jeffrey, and he will talk about his freestall flipping and increased cow comfort. So take it away, Jeffrey.
Okay, thanks, John. I think you need to hand over the share screen to me. Okay, thanks for the opportunity to present today as part of your series. I certainly enjoy all the time we have on dairies together in New York, and as I visit around other colleagues around the country, I look forward to the time when I can get back out on farms a little bit more soon. This has certainly been a challenge and a different scenario for us here. As John mentioned, I spent a lot of my time working with cow comfort. I spent the last 20 years or so working in this area. I worked with Dr. Roger Palmer. He was my advisor for my master's program at the University of Wisconsin, and he was an expert in freestall design. And then for a while, I spent a lot of time also working with compost-bedded pack barns, particularly around here in the Southeast. But today we're going to talk specifically about how we can improve cow comfort in freestall barns. And a lot of what I do is what I call freestall flipping, and we'll describe that a little bit more here in a bit. So when we first start thinking about freestall barns, I think one of the most important things we can do is to compare what the cow's behavior and what her needs are in her natural environment. So her natural environment obviously being when she's on pasture. And we want to think about how she's going to lay down, how she's going to rest, and how she's going to stand up and move within our freestall barn. And we want to try to mimic that as well as we can within a freestall barn as what they can do on pasture. So our goal is to be able to provide these two scenarios. We want to see a cow that's comfortable both when she's lying and standing. So on the right, we see a cow that's comfortably lying down in a freestall, and on the left, we see a cow that's comfortably standing, all 4 feet in the stall in a freestall barn. When we walk into a barn, I want to see that most cows are either eating, resting, or standing in the stall. You see a picture that looks somewhat like this. Most of the animals in this picture are doing that. We see one cow standing with her front feet in the stall, back feet out of the stall. That would be what we would call perching behavior, and a couple of cows moving between behaviors. But for the most part, the cows are doing what we want them to do in this particular snapshot, and that's our goal. In actuality, when we really get into the most comfortable freestall barns, we also won't see many cows standing in the stall. If we see a lot of cows standing in the stall, that's also a sign that perhaps something is amiss with cow comfort. Of course, we know that there are a lot of costs associated with poor cow comfort. Our cows don't produce to the level that they could with good cow comfort. We end up losing milk quality bonuses. We lose money related to the cost of lameness, decreased longevity, increased veterinary costs, decreased reproductive performance, increased labor costs, and certainly Another huge issue for us today is reduced animal well-being, and we want to make sure that we provide that cow with as good of a scenario for well-being as possible, not just for the right thing to do for the cow, but also so that we can communicate to our consumers that we're providing her that kind of an environment. Many of you are probably familiar with a lot of the shows that are out on TV where they do house flipping, or maybe you're a house flipper yourself, where you take an old house and you flip it. Perhaps you resell it, perhaps you use it for your own use. I sort of like the idea of taking that idea of flipping a house and converting that to the freestall barn. So I really like to do freestall flipping. In fact, it's one of my favorite things to do, is to go into an old freestall barn and look for opportunities to improve that old freestall barn and flip it into a nice freestall barn. There have only been a handful of times in my career where I felt like we couldn't do something very positive to an old freestall barn to improve cow comfort, and only a couple of times where I felt like the best thing to do was really to tear that barn down. I take it as a challenge to find those opportunities to flip a freestall barn. I spend a lot of my time listening to cows, and I think cows tell us a lot with their behavior about what they like and don't like about the freestalls that we're providing them. And you can see there are images here in all these pictures of cows telling us things that they don't like about the freestall barn. Perhaps in the upper left, we have cows that are not really fitting in the stalls. We have cows standing with their front feet in the stall, back feet out of the stall. We have cows lying in the alley. A number of different behaviors from the cows in these pictures telling us we don't really like the stalls that you provided us. What are the things that we need to look for after we've listened to them? One of the most important things that I've learned over the years is that everything about freestall design and freestall dimensions is a trade-off between cow comfort and cow cleanliness. We want to maintain both, of course, but sometimes I see people focus so much on one or the other one suffers. And particularly where we get into scenarios where people get so concerned about stall cleanliness that they forget that the cleanest stalls are the ones that are so uncomfortable that the cows won't use them. Really an important message there. The cleanest stalls are the ones that are so uncomfortable that the cows won't use them. And you can see here an example of some really clean stalls where the cows are not using the stalls because they're not long enough, there's no lunch space, etc., and keeps the stalls really clean. We want to see how cows react to the stalls. And you can see this is a barn that I was working with probably a decade or so ago now, where they had a lot of cow comfort issues, cows lying backwards in the stalls, cows walking along the ends of the stalls, some of the cows deciding that it's so bad in there they should get out. But the ultimate and the downside to what we see here is we end up with a lot of lame cows in this scenario. So this was a barn that we were able to successfully flip and dramatically improve cow comfort with a few changes. Of course, there are a number of different challenges and problems that we can have with freestalls. We can have scenarios where stalls are too big. Stalls can actually be too flexible. So there are some benefits, of course, to some of these flex stall type designs, but in times they can be too flexible, particularly with younger animals. Stalls can certainly be too small, they can be too short, but no matter what, and eventually we're going to have to get out our tape measure and actually measure the dimensions of the stalls to be able to identify if there's a problem. There are times when we can look at the stall and immediately see that the neck raise, the replicator is too short or whatever, but many times it's a couple of inches difference, and we have to get the tape measure out to be able to pick up those differences. And it's easy to find these kinds of charts. This is the one that we have here at Alltech of dimensions for freestall barns, freestall loops, etc., with different sized animals. And I think it's really important that we think about sizing the stalls for the largest cow in the pen. So we have to remember that a big cow is never comfortable in a stall that's too small for her, but a small cow is always comfortable in a stall that's too big for her. So we want to design the stall for the biggest cow in the pen. So that's where these weights come into play, and we want to measure based on the weights where our stalls should be. And somebody posed a question here about, do we design the stalls for different sized animals, different groups of animals? If we have the ability to do that, there's a huge advantage to that. So if we can have a first lactation pen where maybe we look at that 1,300 to 1,500 pound animal, and a mature cow pen where we look at a larger pen, larger freestall size, then there's a huge advantage to that in getting that right balance between cow comfort and cow cleanliness. Because no doubt that if we are going with that idea of if every cow is the same in the same freestall barn, or all of our stalls are the same size, we do end up with younger animals, for example, that are going to be too small for the stalls, and we're going to end up with dirtier stalls. So great question there. Of course, there are other things that we can measure to identify the cow's response to cow comfort. Locomotion scoring is one of those areas. I really like this 3-point locomotion scoring system. It was developed by the USDA NOMS group, and it's been used now by the farm program. I think it's much simpler than the old 5-point system. It's simple in that we just have a 1, that's a normal posturing gait. A 2 is an animal that has moderate lameness. She stands normally, but she may favor one or more limbs when she's walking. And the 3 is that cow where we definitely have more lameness. They're really avoiding one limb, and they may arch the back, or they may bob their head while they're walking. So this is much simpler, I think, than the 5-point system. And locomotion scoring is a great way to track how animals are responding to cow comfort. Another area, of course, is hygiene scoring. So hygiene scoring, basically a 1 to 4 system. The 1 is a really clean cow, 2 is very clean, and then 3 and 4 are getting dirtier. Our goal should be that less than 10% of the cows are in that 3 to 4 range. Of course, there are always going to be a few animals that get a little bit dirty, but we want to see less than 10%, and I think that's a very, very achievable goal. Why is that? There is a direct relationship between hygiene and somatic cell count. We can look at this graph here. On the y-axis, we have the proportion of cows with udder scores of 3 or 4. On the x-axis, we have bulk tank somatic cell count, and the trend is exactly how we would expect it. The dirtier the cows are, the more animals we have that are in that 3 to 4 range, the higher the somatic cell count. So I think we need to remember this. Cow cleanliness is very important for managing somatic cell count. Hot scoring is another opportunity that we have to measure the cow's response to her environment. Again, a 1 to 3 system, a 1 where we see very little to no hair loss on the hawk, a 2, we do have some hair loss but no swelling, and a 3 where we have visible swelling. Of course, that's an extreme example in the picture here, but unfortunately one that most of us have seen more than once in our careers. We want to see most of our animals looking at that 1, and one of the things that I think is really key here is this has a lot to do with the stall surface. And when we go into deep bedded situations, it's very, very easy to achieve almost 100%, if not 100% of the animals that are a 1 for a hawk score. So we get into deep bedded sand, compost bedded pack barns, deep bedded manure solids, all of those, we're going to be able to achieve these issues where we don't have hawk problems. Transitions into what my biases are for stall base. My top 10 choices for stall base are sand. In other words, number 1 is sand, number 2 is sand, number 3 is sand, all the way down to number 10 is sand. Sand is by far the gold standard for what we can do to provide the cow a comfortable, clean place to lay down. It's really, really wonderful. The next one I would say would be compost manure, manure solids, whatever you want to call it. Really comfortable. I think probably in many cases almost, if not as comfortable as a sand freestall. But we do have some concerns, particularly in the hotter and humid climates, about managing those manure solids from a somatic cell count and bacterial exposure perspective. They do seem to work in many different environments, but it does take a little bit more babysitting to keep those things working. The next best option I would say is a waterbed. I really like the waterbeds from the perspective that the amount of give that they have is the same in year 1 as it is in year 2. Fairly comfortable for the cow. We did a study when I was at the University of Kentucky showing that cows on waterbeds laid down about 45 minutes a day longer than cows in a mattress-based scenario. The next one I would say would be a good mattress, and I say that because there's a wide variety of master quality that is out there. Then I would say straw, pretty comfortable, but difficult to maintain from a milk quality perspective. And then I would say the old mattress would be the next best option for a stall surface. I really don't like rubber mats. These rubber mats, they're not expensive, but you get what you pay for. They're just one small step better than concrete. In fact, I actually call them black concrete. I don't think these are very useful. I see them all too often in tie stall barns, but really, we should try to avoid these. We want to get to at least the standard of a good mattress, if not some scenario where we can get into deep bedding. Even when we use a mattress or some type of synthetic surface, the amount of bedding that we have on top of those stalls is really important. This was a study that was done about 15 years ago at the University of British Columbia, where they showed with the same stalls, just increasing the amount of bedding in those stalls had a dramatic impact on the amount of time the cow spent lying in the stall. So going from no bedding to 16.5 pounds of bedding, we saw over an hour increase in lying time just by putting more bedding in the same stalls. When we see these hock injuries, it's almost always because of a hard surface or not using enough bedding. Pretty easy to identify the cause, and this is something that the farm program is keeping a closer eye on, wanting to make sure that we minimize these hock injuries. Freestall bedding should be liberal. It should look like this, where we don't have enough bedding, or like this, where we really don't have any bedding, or like this, where we actually have a deep bedded scenario and they don't have enough bedding in the stall, and the cows are kind of lying in a bowl. In addition to that, they have a block in their lunch space here, so not very easy for these cows to get up out of those stalls. Dirty alleys give us dirty stalls and dirty cows. So really important that we maintain alley cleanliness. Keeping those alleys scraped frequently really can be extremely helpful from a milk quality perspective. Stalls that are too small, we end up with more tails in the alley, and those tails come back up on the udder and on the back of the animal. When I was at the University of Kentucky, we did a study where we looked at compost barns, and in compost barns where cows really aren't even spending very much time in the alleys at all, there was a 50,000 somatic cell count difference between herds that scraped the alley twice a day versus once a day. In another study, we looked at bacteria levels in freestall barns on the stalls themselves, on the cows' teat ends, and in the milk coming from the cows. And we found significant differences in bacteria levels at all three of those places based on scraping the alleys twice a day. So scraping more frequently really is a huge benefit for keeping cows cleaner. Although sand is our gold standard, and by now you know I really love sand, even sand can be dirty and lead to mastitis if it's not managed well. So much of all facility use is about managing them correctly. That means we've got to spend time with a rake or spend time with equipment to make sure that we groom the stalls to provide those cows a clean and comfortable place to lay down. As I travel around the country, I find that there's a lot of confusion about the purpose of different parts of the stall design itself. Let's get a little review here. The neck rail is really about positioning the cow as she gets up, and it preserves her lunge space. The brisket board or brisket locator, it helps position the cow as she lies down, and it discourages forward movement while resting. Too often I see people try to use the neck rail in the way that a brisket locator is supposed to be used. That neck rail, people push that neck rail back toward the back of the stall, thinking that they're going to keep the cows from lying too far forward in the stall. And in actuality, it doesn't necessarily do that. But by doing that, they end up pushing the cows back while they're standing, and we increase the perching behavior. So I think it's really important to think about the purpose of each of these aspects of the stall design. We want to think about, of course, where do cows defecate? What I'd like to see is that picture that we have in the middle or on the right, where when the cows defecate, it's going to be in the alley, not the picture that we see here on the left, where that cow has defecated in the back of the stall. There are lots of debate about whether or not we should have a brisket locator or not. And I would say that one of my biggest mistakes of my career working with Freestalls was not considering the brisket locator. There's some work that came out that showed that cows are more comfortable without a brisket locator. And certainly that makes sense. There's less restrictions. But that work also showed that although the cows were less restricted, they were dirtier. And all too often I see this scenario that we see in these pictures. These are all three examples of stalls without a brisket locator. And in all three cases, the cows are too far forward in the stall. The stalls get dirty, and we end up with more mastitis and a higher somatic cell count. I like to see a brisket locator. I think we can get the brisket locator in the right position to where we don't impair cow comfort and we still maximize cow cleanliness. And in many cases, we've been able to go into existing barns, add a brisket locator later, and improve somatic cell count, improve cow cleanliness, and reduce sand use. So the brisket locator, a bit controversial, but I really prefer the brisket locator to be there. And there are some farms that don't need a brisket locator. If they really do a nice job maintaining the stall level, perhaps putting a little bit more sand in the front of the stall, then they don't need a brisket locator. But in my experience, that's probably 1 out of 10 or 2 out of 10 farms that don't need a brisket locator. I prefer the term brisket locator as opposed to brisket board because I prefer a rounded brisket locator. You see here an example of a cow that's 2 cows that are lying their leg over that rounded brisket locator. That's not something they can comfortably do with a brisket board. We want to make sure that that brisket locator is not more than 6 inches above the stall surface. Brisket locator of a PVC pipe works really, really well. There are pillows out there, different types of commercial brisket locators. Those work great too. Even telephone poles can work right, but the PVC pipe works really, really well for a brisket locator. We also want to think about designing the stalls for natural lunging behavior. Cow, when she gets up, think about again how she's going to get up on pasture. She's going to get up by pushing her head forward and putting her butt up into the air. And we need to make sure that we preserve some space in front of that cow for her to be able to perform this behavior naturally. Watch the cows as they get up. This cow is having a little bit of difficulty getting up because there is a physical impediment. This chicken wire up in front of her is keeping her from being able to lunge naturally. So people say, well, we have to have that there because otherwise the curtains are going to blow. Well, we can manage that by putting sort of a lean-to, like you see in the pictures here, to where we can still have those curtains, but maximize and maintain that lunging space. When we don't have enough lunge space, we end up with poor stall use. We end up with cows that get injured, or we end up with a lot of perching behavior. We need to remember too, though, that the cow has very poor depth perception, and cables can actually block lunge space too. So in each of the pictures here, this cable in between the stalls is too low, and it's right in the cow's lunge space. So this is almost the same as having a board in front of that cow. We can easily remedy that by moving that cable up higher. I actually prefer a nylon strap, and if we put that nylon strap or cable 36 inches to 40 inches above the stall surface, we're not going to have that issue. But in many cases, that cable is too low. Raise that up a little bit, and we'll provide that cow a more comfortable place to lay down and allow her to be able to lunge forward naturally. Perching behavior. Lots and lots of this behavior out in freestall barns. It is almost always an indication of improper neck rail position. The neck rail may be too low, or it may be too short. It could also be related to brisket locator. There are times when it's related to heat stress, but for the most part, it is a neck rail problem. And we can go in and make a big difference by moving that neck rail to reduce that perching behavior. We want to avoid that perching behavior because with perching behavior, the cow is putting way too much pressure on those rear feet, and the rear feet are in the moisture. So we increase our exposure to digital dermatitis, bacteria, opportunities for foot rot, etc. This is a cow that I watched a couple of years ago in a dairy in Brazil. And I've cut out a little snippet of video here of this cow sort of performing a dance to be able to lay down. In actuality, it was about a 5-minute video. And that cow, this is a rather large cow, but the reason it took her so long to figure out a way is because she couldn't get positioned in there because of the neck rail. The neck rail is actually too low in this barn. Raising that neck rail would have allowed this cow to be able to get into the stall more comfortably. So we see these scenarios where the neck rail is in the wrong position, cow's perching. You can see in the picture on the right where they've actually pushed it forward over time, the curve that you can see in that picture. How do we fix it? Well, we just need to raise that neck rail. We can do this in a number of different ways. We can use wood blocks, we can use some steel clamps, move the divider, use your creativity. I've seen lots of people accomplish this successfully in different ways. There are commercial clamps that you can buy to raise that neck rail. Many people, though, I've seen have had a local welder design those clamps for them. A similar issue that I see is with the feed neck rail in post and rail neck rail systems. You can see all 4 pictures here where we have abrasions on the neck or scenarios where that neck rail is really pushing against the cow's neck, or in the case of the guardrail where the cows really can hardly even get their head under that guardrail. These are problems, and they all have a negative impact on dry matter intake. No doubt that animal, particularly on the upper right, her intake has suffered because of that neck rail problem in this particular barn. There are a few different things that we have to think about here. So look at the picture on the left. We have a feed rail system with improper dimensions, and on the right we have proper dimensions. You can see how much further that cow can reach on the right. There are a few differences here. First of all, the floor where the cow's standing is a few inches lower, 2 to 6 inches lower than the feed floor. Secondly, that curb is smaller on the right picture on the right than on the left, and then the distance between the curb and the upper rail is greater, and that upper rail is leaned out some. So putting that upper rail at an angle can make a big difference also. There are dimensions for this, of course, and I see particularly that height of that upper rail being a problem. This is a design that we have at Alltech. It's actually using some data from Penn State. And this one, or the Freestall dimension, John can get these to you if you're interested in those, or feel free to contact me also. We go into barns a lot and see this problem. You can see this is a before and after of a barn with some brown Swiss cows. Cows, you can see on the left that one cow has to stand at an angle to be able to reach the feed. The other cow, that neck rail is pushing up against her neck. And we got this farm to move this neck rail, and a dramatic difference in how far these cows could reach. And they said immediately they saw an increase in intake just by making that one move. And of course, an increase in intake will lead to an increase in milk yield. There are alternative designs to the neck rail, the feed neck rail that we're seeing now. Some of you may see these post and rail systems like in the upper right. These provide that opportunity where there's no pressure on the neck, and also will provide some physical separation between cows in the bunk so that a boss cow can't have any advantage over the whole row. So this is one potential solution to this problem. There's also on the upper left where there's a design here where there's a chain that allows the cow to push that out a little bit so they can still have more flexibility, but the cows don't get out. And then a really simple solution that I really like here on the bottom left, just again, a nylon strap here, provide some give to be able to allow those cows to more comfortably reach their feet. Another important consideration in freestall design is the crossover. On the left, you see a picture of a very narrow crossover. Two cows can barely move through together. And on the right, we see a much more desirable crossover, wide, plenty of space, and water is placed there. Much prefer that design on the right compared to the design on the left. In fact, the design on the left is narrow enough. I think that they would benefit from removing two head-to-head stalls, even if they lose two stalls, just to be able to give those animals more crossover space. One of the newer challenges that I see in freestall barn is when we put these grooming brushes in. And you can see all three scenarios here where the grooming brush is right by the water and we have some cow traffic issues. Cows love these grooming brushes. Whether or not they're beneficial or not is a discussion for another day, but no doubt that they love them and they really use them, and they're a very positive thing from a consumer perception issue. But they block water, and I think that water is more important to the cow than the grooming behavior. And even in the one on the upper right where we have a water and a grooming brush, you could say, well, there's cows that are drinking and there's cows that are brushing, and that's okay, but there's no space for those cows to get between. I would argue that in each of these three scenarios, that brush should be somewhere else. It shouldn't be by those waters. Of course, we can fix this in a new barn just by putting a wider crossover. Of course, we lose space, or we have to build a bigger barn to do this. But in this situation you see in the picture here, cows are able to drink, cows are able to brush, and cows are able to get between comfortably in this situation. So when I see new barns being built, I ask, are you going to put a brush in? Or do you think you might ever put a brush in? And in that case, I'd really like to see a 20-foot crossover. Denmark is actually now requiring that brushes are in barns. Usually whatever happens in Europe makes its way over here to the US eventually, so I wouldn't be surprised to see that kind of requirement in the future here. Therefore, I would want to put a 20-foot crossover. We'll shift gears a little bit here and talk for a bit about cow cooling. We need to remember that heat stress starts when the THI is about 68. That's what the data says. As we increase milk yields, that's going to go even lower. I would argue that we see some signs of heat stress even lower than this. In hot environments, we should think about building barns for the summer, not for the winter. And we need to remember that natural ventilation is free. Everything that we do to improve things like ridge openings or the slope of the roof, a few $1,000s a year can save us a lot of money over a 25, 30-year life of a barn. Really not the place to skimp. Natural ventilation is free. So the most important things to remember in cow cooling, first of all, fans and sprinklers only work when they're turned on. That might sound a little bit obvious, but all too often I go into barns this time of the year and the fans aren't on yet. It's 80 degrees here in Kentucky today. The fans should definitely be on today. They are a huge return on investment, and we need to remember not just the lactating cows, but also the dry cows and the holding pens. The holding pen is the hottest place on the barn. Barn orientation is also really important, and our general preference is for an east-west oriented barn. I used to think this was more about airflow, trying to maximize the natural flow of air coming from the south in many parts of the country. But now I think it's more about light flow. And these two videos show the difference in how the sun comes up over the barn with an east-west orientation compared to a north-south orientation. With an east-west orientation, the sun comes over the top of the barn, and there's a little bit of the day in the morning when it's really blaring down on one side of the barn, and a little bit of the day in the afternoon when it's blaring down on the other end of the barn. But with a north-south orientation, it comes over the broad side of the barn. So at some point in the day, it has a major impact on light in that barn at every point in that barn where the cows are. And cows, particularly in hot temperatures, will move away from sunlight. Of course, light affects cow behavior in every orientation of barn, but the east-west orientation has much less percentage of the day where light affects cow behavior. And light has a major impact on cow bunching. So I really have a strong preference for building an east-west oriented barn. Light moves cows. Here we can see a barn, a north-south oriented barn, where the sun's coming in on the side of the barn. And what's happening? The cows are avoiding that section of the barn where the light's coming in, and they're bunching in the middle of the barn. Bunching behavior is largely related to light. There are a number of different factors that affect bunching behavior, and that is also a discussion for another day, but light is really important, and that's one of the reasons why an east-west orientation is preferred. Fans are also extremely beneficial. We can have fans in lots of different scenarios. Double row of fans over freestalls is preferred on head-to-head stalls. We can even move to the high volume low speed fans in some situations. The rule of thumb for thinking about fan position, the distance between fans should be about 10 times the diameter. In other words, a 36-inch fan, those fans should be placed about 30 feet apart, 48-inch fan about 40 feet apart, etc. We want those fans to be tilted about 15 to 20 degrees or aimed to where the trajectory of air from one fan hits the ground at the point where the next fan starts. So this is the ideal scenario here. We have fans angled properly. We have a row of fans over each row of stalls and a row of fans over the feed bunk with a soaker system. And the other thing that I'll point out in this picture is that notice that soaker line is only about a foot above the cow's backs. I see this in Florida where they deal with heat stress much more often than the rest of the country. And when I travel in the Midwestern and Northeastern parts of the US, I tend to see those sprinkler lines much higher. And I think we get a more effective coverage of the cow, when we have these lower sprinkler lines. there are different mistakes that we can make with fans. One of the mistakes I see is not having fans over each freestall row. The picture on the left, we have a scenario where the fans are over the middle stalls, the head-to-head stall, but they're not on the outside stall. And people will say, well, we don't need them on the outside row because we have natural air there. We may have natural air, but I encourage you to pull out an anemometer that measures wind speed. And what we'll find often is I'll be standing outside and somebody will say, we don't need fans in this barn because the natural air is so good. We always have a breeze. It feels great. Don't you feel it right now? And I pull on my anemometer, and that natural breeze is about 1 to 2 miles an hour, which feels great to us as people. It takes 5 to 7 miles an hour to cool a cow. So even though that natural breeze may be there, we don't necessarily get enough to cool the cow with that 1 to 2 mile an hour wind. Now, the other situation that we have on the picture on the right is where we have a row of fans right in the middle between the head-to-head stalls, not over the stalls. And this is an example of what can happen in that situation. This is a barn that I visited last summer in Georgia, where I measured airspeed in front of the fans in that area in between the stalls where there are no cows, and I was getting a great airspeed. The airspeed there was over 9 miles an hour. But when I actually moved over to measure the air in the stalls where the cows were, at a standing level, I was at 2 miles an hour, but at a lying position, I was only around 1 mile an hour. And I'd really like to see that be 5 miles an hour lying position, because that's what we want the cows to do. We want them to lie down in the stalls, not stand in the stalls. So sometimes we may go in and say, wow, the cow's standing. Why do I have cows perching? And this is the reason. We have fans, but the fans aren't effectively cooling the cows at their lying position. Another huge mistake that I see is just not cleaning fans enough. Fans should be cleaned at least twice a year. And you can see all 3 pictures here where we have dirty fans. And in these cases, these fans are running at probably 50–60% of their potential efficiency. It costs the same amount to buy them, same amount to run them, perhaps even a little bit more because they're not running as efficiently, and we're not getting full use of those fans when we have dirty fans like this. Another mistake I see is placing fans against an inlet wall. So here we have fans right up against the inlet wall. There's no natural air coming in there. We're not working with nature. Simple solution is just open an inlet. You can see now in this picture where we have an inlet to where natural air comes into that barn to really flow on those cows much better. Last summer I was in a barn in Minnesota where we had the opportunity to measure a difference just when they had a door. And when we opened the door versus closed the door, it changed the airflow by 4 times. Opening that door in front of that fan improved airflow by 4 times. So keeping that inlet there is really important. And another challenge is just not having fans at the right angles. You can see on the picture on the left where we have fans that are placed at too steep of an angle. The cows are not really getting covered very well. On the right, we have fans that are really not placed in the correct position at all, moving toward the middle of the barn. I also see times when the fans are blowing straight through the barn, not actually blowing down on the cows at all because they're not angled. Another mistake that I see, although not as often, is where we have fans in the alleys. What do we do when we put fans in the alleys? We encourage cows to stand in the alleys. We don't want them in the alleys. We want them either eating the feed bunk or lying resting in the stalls. Sprinklers are also really important. And when we get to a certain level, there's really not much we can do with cooling cows with fans, and we need to take advantage of some evaporative cooling. When we get into humid climates like we have in most of the eastern United States, we really need to think about soakers or sprinklers and not misters. Misters tend to increase the humidity and don't work very well in a humid climate. They work great in an arid climate, but we need to think about sprinklers in the eastern U.S. and sprinkler lines placed above, right by the by the feed bunk, Some general rules to think about for sprinklers. We want to wet the cow to the skin. Our wet cycle maybe less than 2 minutes. Dry cycle 10 to 15 minutes. We have to have that dry cycle to make this work effectively. Use low pressure so we get large water droplets and cover 5 to 6 feet behind the feed barrier. Another important consideration is concrete grooving. These are general recommendations from the Dairyland Initiative for grooving concrete. Really, really critical. Too often I see a lot of our feet and leg problems and injury problems caused by slick concrete. So really important. And also in older barns that we think about re-grooving older barns. The last major point I want to make is that sometimes we get into scenarios where we have cows walking down a major slope, and that can create some serious issues for injuries and slippage. Steps work really well. When we use large steps like you see in the picture here, cows can flow very well. So this is a nice way to get around scenarios where we have a large slope to move animals through. I hope that you have some new ideas, some new things to look for in the Freestall barns that you work with. There's my contact information. I'm happy to provide you with any of the information in the slides, any of the guidelines and measurements that we talked about. And if we have time, John, I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, Jeffrey. Well, I sure appreciate the time, and that's really great practical information. That's one of my favorite things about you is all the practical information that you give on farm, and I really appreciate it. So a couple questions real quick. What do you feel is the most common freestall issue that you see on farms? Number one, from a new install, or number two, from existing freestalls?
Good question. I think in new installs, it would probably be crossover length or crossover width. I mean, that would probably be the major issue that I see, and poor concrete grooving. Those would be the two biggest things I see in new installs. In existing facilities, I would say the biggest issues that I see are probably neck rail position and stall surface. Still too many poor stall surfaces that are out there.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I agree 100%. Any Jeffrey Bewley must-haves for cow comfort besides sand?
We want a big stall. You know, stalls, cows are bigger today. We know a lot more about their behavior. I really like to see 17 to 18 foot head-to-head stalls. We get into scenarios where we see 15 feet head-to-head stalls. Cows don't like to share head space very well, and that has a major impact on their behavior. But big stalls, I guess, would be the number one thing I would say. And then I guess the next must-have would be, I really think we need to use water in most of the country at some point in the year, some kind of evaporative cooling.
All right, appreciate that. A question from Daniel. Do you have a 1 to 10 list for stall divider types?
I don't. That's a good question. I think most of the new loops that you would get today are going to be pretty good. I like to have a wide loop that allows for both forward and side lunging. I want to be able to have some protection on the back end so that the cow can't slide underneath the loop. I still probably am a little bit on the fence on some of these flex stalls. There are some where it seems to work great and some where I see too much flexibility. And I think some of that might be a brand difference, but I don't have enough of a sample size in my mind to still decide yet. I see somewhere, like I say, I really think those flex stalls seem to be doing a nice job, and others where I just see a lot of dirty cows, or where cows they're so flexible that one cow ends up taking a stall and a half. But no, I guess that was a long-winded answer to a no.
Now, on some of these flex stalls that you see, I'm sure you've probably had some herds where you've made repeat visits. What's your thought on how they seem to hold up? I see enough of them, and some of the early ones were not real sturdy, and they ended up being no stall versus flex stall. So have you seen that many that have kind of stood somewhat the test of time in the limited time that they've been out?
They seem to hold up pretty well. And every once in a while one will break, but the farms that I've talked to have said the companies that sold them have been pretty good about replacing the broken one, but they seem to be pretty sturdy.
Okay, well, that's good. Another question I have for you. One thing that we see a lot on farm, and I think we've seen it for years and we'll probably continue to see it, is bunching in free stalls and crowding in free stalls, especially in the summer. There's many opinions on what causes that. I guess I would like what your opinion is on why many cows bunch to certain areas in the free stalls.
Well, I think there's many opinions because there's many causes. So in actuality, I think most of the opinions are probably right. Whether or not we know exactly which one it is for which scenario, I don't think we know. I remember once, probably about 15 years ago, where I was looking for some information on bunching behavior, and I found where somebody wrote a statement that whoever is able to solve bunching behavior in cows deserves a Nobel Prize. And I think that's probably true because it's really perplexing. In the end, I think bunching behavior, we have to think about it from an evolutionary perspective. It is the cow's response to stress. And in a natural environment, the cow would bunch because she's trying to get away from predators. And that's where some people, rightfully so, will indicate that the bunching behavior is caused by flies. And there are cases where flies are the cause of bunching behavior, particularly I think horn flies can be a contributor to that. Obviously, it has something to do with heat stress because we rarely see that behavior in cooler times. We see bunching behavior in all environments. We see it in freestall barns, we see it in bedded pack barns, and we see it in pasture. So it's heat stress related. Sometimes it can be because of a difference in airflow. Cows will tend to go to areas where the airflow is better. So it may be something relative to not having enough fans or not having the fans in the right position, and we might be able to fix it with fans. There are times when it's because barns are positioned too close together. Remember, the general rule of thumb is that two barns should be at least 100 feet apart. And sometimes we offset one barn and we have one part of the barn that is influenced by another barn and another part of the same barn is not influenced. And that can be a contributing factor. Another thing that I think has a major impact, again, comes back to light. We definitely see more bunching behavior in north-south oriented barns. The east-west orientation is really important where we can do that. Obviously, we can't do anything about that in an existing barn. The other thing that we have found is that cows will go to a darker area of the barn, even if it's poorly lit, even if it's poorly well ventilated, if it's not ventilated well. There are times when we can fix that with artificial light. Basically, what we do is we put light in the dark part of the barn to even the light flow out across the barn. So in the end, I think there are 4 causes of bunching: flies, air, light, and heat stress.
All right, I appreciate the answer. Yeah, that's something that I think we have always faced and we will always face it. So I don't see any more questions, and we are approaching the 3 o'clock hour. Jeffrey, I wanted to really thank you for the great information, and hopefully we'll have you on again for for some different talks, and thank you for that. I appreciate it. There will be no fireside chat next week. Next week is obviously the one conference, a large conference for Alltech. Typically, we have about 3,500 people from all over the world attend in Lexington. This year, obviously, with the way everything is a different situation. We are having a one virtual conference with some really good keynote speakers that are coming. It starts next Monday, goes through basically the 22nd. Monday at 9 o'clock, we start in the morning with Katie Coleman, who is an astronaut. So it will be very interesting. The one good thing about this is obviously you've been on this fireside chat and you've attended these, and you will see in front of you the way you can register for the Alltech One conference. And I am willing to give out the passcode for free for the event for this year. And you can actually go back and look at the sessions throughout the whole year. You will have 365 days to go back and either watch the sessions for the first time or review the sessions that you've seen. So it's a great opportunity. Please sign up before Monday. It's easy to sign up. It doesn't take much time to sign up, and then you use the code United States or Canada for some of our Canadian friends, and then you can sign up, and then it will start Monday. But it is a great conference, and I know we're going to be spending a lot of time next week with that conference. But with that, I appreciate the time, and thank you for coming in and enjoying the fireside chat for this week. It has been recorded, so we are going to be sharing that here as soon as I get it edited. I appreciate your time, and thank you.